I still remember the exact moment I realized I was in love with Marcus Chen. It wasn't during some grand romantic gesture or perfect sunset. It was 3 in the morning on a Tuesday, standing in the parking lot of a half-finished strip mall in suburban Phoenix, watching him kneel in wet cement with a screwdriver carefully etching something where no one would ever see it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up. I met Marcus during the worst summer of my life. I was 24, fresh out of a relationship that had imploded spectacularly and desperate for something, anything, to fill the hours between waking up and going back to sleep. My older brother Jake worked in construction and threw me a lifeline in the form of a job on his crew. Nothing glamorous, mostly grunt work, hauling materials, cleaning up sites, whatever needed doing, but it was honest work, and it kept my hands busy enough that my mind couldn't spiral too far into the wreckage of what I'd lost. Marcus was the concrete finisher. He'd been working with Jake's company for about 2 years, and from what I gathered, he was something of an artist in his field. Which sounds ridiculous, right? An artist who works with cement. But the first time I watched him work, I understood. There was this precision to everything he did, this careful attention to detail that transformed what should have been mundane into something almost meditative. He was quiet. That was the first thing I noticed about him. In a crew full of guys who never stopped talking, Marcus would go entire days speaking maybe 20 words total. He'd show up exactly on time, do his work with this intense focus, and leave the moment his shift ended. No drinks after work, no joining the guys for lunch, no small talk by the water cooler. He was there to work, and that was it. I'll be honest, at first I thought he was just stuck up. You know the type, too good to socialize with the rest of us mere mortals. But then one afternoon, about 2 weeks into the job, I was struggling to move a pallet of supplies by myself. I'd been too proud to ask for help, convinced I could handle it alone, and I'd gotten the hand truck wedged at an angle that was slowly tipping the whole thing toward disaster. I was sweating, swearing under my breath, about 2 seconds from either dropping everything or throwing my back out when Marcus just appeared beside me. He didn't say anything, just grabbed the other side of the load, helped me steady it, and together we maneuvered it exactly where it needed to go. When we finished, he met my eyes for just a second, gave the smallest nod, and walked away. That became our pattern. He'd help me when I needed it, always without being asked, always without making a big deal of it. And slowly, over those first few weeks, I started to realize that Marcus wasn't standoffish. He was just contained, like he carried everything important deep inside where it couldn't be touched or broken. I found myself watching him more than I probably should have. The way his hands moved when he worked, confident and sure. The way he'd pause sometimes, standing back to examine a section he'd just finished, head tilted slightly like he was listening to something only he could hear. He had this habit of pushing his safety glasses up onto his head when he was concentrating, and there was something about that gesture that made my chest feel tight. I told myself it was just appreciation for his skill, admiration for someone who was really good at what they did. But I knew I was lying to myself. I'd felt this before, this magnetic pull toward someone, this hyper-awareness of another person's presence. I'd felt it with Daniel, my ex, in the beginning before everything fell apart. And I'd promised myself I wouldn't go down that road again, especially not with someone I worked with, especially not with someone who clearly had no interest in letting anyone get close. But the heart doesn't really care about the promises we make to ourselves, does it? The shift happened on a Friday in late July. We were working on a residential development, and the heat was absolutely brutal. By 2 in the afternoon, it had to be pushing 110 degrees. Most of the crew was moving in slow motion, taking every excuse to duck into the shade, but Marcus was still working at his usual steady pace. I was supposed to be helping him, but mostly I was just trying not to pass out. I must have looked pretty rough because Marcus stopped what he was doing, walked over to the cooler, pulled out a bottle of water and handed it to me. "Drink," he said. His voice was surprisingly soft, almost gentle. "I'm okay," I said, even though I very obviously wasn't. He raised an eyebrow. "You're 3 shades paler than you were an hour ago. Drink the water, Connor." It was the first time he'd said my name. I'd been working alongside him for over a month, and I hadn't been sure he even knew what I was called. Hearing it in his voice did something strange to my pulse. I drank the water. He watched me until I'd finished the whole bottle, then nodded and went back to work. But something had changed. Some invisible wall had developed the tiniest crack. After that, we started talking. Nothing deep at first, just small exchanges about the work, the weather, whether the coffee truck that came by at lunch was worth the price. But those small exchanges led to slightly longer conversations. I learned that Marcus had grown up in Seattle, that he'd moved to Phoenix for reasons he didn't elaborate on, that he lived alone in a small apartment near Tempe. He asked me questions too, careful ones, like he was testing whether I was someone worth trusting with real answers. I told him about my breakup, though I kept the details vague, just said it had ended badly and I was still figuring out how to move forward. He didn't press for more, just listened with this quality of attention that made me feel actually heard. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, then said, "Endings are hard, but sometimes they make space for something better." It was such a simple thing to say, but it lodged itself somewhere deep in my chest and stayed there. We started taking our lunch breaks together. Nothing was formally decided, it just became our routine. We'd find a spot with some shade, eat whatever we'd brought, and talk. Marcus slowly opened up, sharing pieces of himself in these careful increments. He told me about learning concrete work from his uncle, about how he'd always been good with his hands but terrible at sitting still in classrooms. He talked about his love for old architecture, how he could lose hours just looking at buildings, studying the craftsmanship of earlier eras. "There's something about making things that last," he said one day, staring at the foundation we'd been working on. "Long after we're gone, this will still be here. Someone will walk across it, build a life on top of it, and they'll never know our names or that we were here. But we'll have mattered anyway." The way he said it, with this quiet intensity, made me understand that this wasn't just a job for him. It was how he made sense of the world, how he left his mark without demanding to be seen. I was falling for him. I knew it with absolute certainty, even though he'd never given me any indication that he might feel the same way. He never mentioned dating anyone, never talked about his personal life in those terms at all, and I was too afraid to ask, too afraid to risk the friendship we were building by wanting more. Then came the night that changed everything. We were working late on a commercial project, this strip mall that was going up near the interstate. The owner wanted the parking lot finished by the weekend, which meant a night pour. The crew had been working since 6 that evening, and by midnight, most of the guys had finished their sections and headed home. It was just Marcus, me, and one other finisher named Ray, putting the last touches on the final section. Ray left around 2. His kid had a soccer game early the next morning, and Marcus told him to go, that we could handle the last bit ourselves. Which was probably true, but it meant being alone with Marcus, in the strange intimacy of a construction site at night, under the harsh glow of work lights, with the rest of the world asleep around us. We worked in comfortable silence for a while. The cement was setting up nicely, smooth and level, exactly how it was supposed to look. Marcus did his final inspection, walking the perimeter with that critical eye of his, making tiny adjustments that probably no one else would ever notice, but that mattered to him. "Perfect," he finally said, and there was satisfaction in his voice. We started cleaning up the tools, getting everything ready to load into the truck. I was coiling up an extension cord when Marcus called my name. I turned around and found him kneeling at the far edge of the pour, in a corner that would eventually be hidden by a dumpster enclosure. He had a screwdriver in his hand, and he was scratching something into the surface of the cement. I walked over, curious. "What are you doing?" He didn't look up. Something I do sometimes, leaving a mark. I crouched down beside him to see what he was writing. The letters were small, careful, carved with the same precision he brought to everything else. My breath caught when I realized what I was reading. Marcus and Connor, July 2019. Just that. Our names together, in his handwriting, in a place no one would ever see once the construction was finished. "Marcus," I said, and my voice came out rougher than I intended. "Why?" He sat back on his heels, finally meeting my eyes. In the harsh light, I could see uncertainty there, vulnerability that he usually kept hidden. "Because I wanted there to be proof," he said quietly, "that this summer happened, that we were here together, even if no one else ever knows." My heart was hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. "What are you saying?" He took a breath, and I watched him gather his courage like it was a physical thing. "I'm saying that I look forward to seeing you every day, that I think about you when you're not around, that I've been terrified to tell you because I didn't want to lose what we already have, but I'm more terrified of never saying anything at all." He gestured at the cement. "I'm saying that I wanted our names together somewhere permanent, even if it's just here, even if it's just us who know." I don't remember making the decision to move. 1 second I was crouching there, trying to process what he'd just said, and the next I was kissing him. My hand was on the back of his neck, his fingers were gripping my shirt, and we were kissing in the middle of a parking lot at 3 in the morning like we were the only two people in the world. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. Marcus touched his forehead to mine, and I could feel him smiling. "I was hoping you'd react like that," he said. I laughed, shaky and overwhelmed. "How long have you felt this way?" "Since about the second week you started working with us. You were trying to move that pallet, remember? You were so determined, so stubborn about not asking for help. And when I came over, you looked at me with this mix of relief and frustration, and I just thought, oh no, this is going to be a problem. Why didn't you say anything sooner?" He pulled back enough to look at me properly. "Because I needed to be sure. Because I've been burned before by wanting something too much, too fast. And because you were healing from something, and I didn't want to be a rebound or a distraction. I wanted to be certain that if I told you, it would be real." "It's real," I said. "Marcus, this is the most real thing I've felt in years." We sat there in the parking lot for another hour, talking in a way we never had before. He told me about his last relationship, a guy named David who'd wanted Marcus to be someone different, someone more outgoing and social, someone who fit better into the life David had planned. He told me about the slow erosion of that relationship, how he'd tried to change himself to make it work, and how hollow that had left him feeling. How he'd moved to Phoenix partly for the job opportunities, but mostly to start over somewhere no one knew him, somewhere he could figure out who he actually was when he wasn't trying to be what someone else needed. I told him about Daniel, about how we'd met in college and built this whole future in our heads, about how it had all come crashing down when Daniel accepted a job in New York and expected me to just drop everything and follow. About the fights, the ultimatums, the way something that had once felt like love turned bitter and small. About how I'd felt like a failure for months afterward, like I'd somehow done something wrong by wanting to stay close to my family, by not being ready to uproot my entire life for someone else's dream. "You're not a failure," Marcus said firmly. "You knew what you needed, and you stood by that. That's not weakness, that's strength." It was almost dawn by the time we finished talking. The sky was starting to lighten at the edges, that deep blue of early morning, and we were still sitting there in the empty parking lot, shoulders pressed together, fingers intertwined. "We should probably get out of here," Marcus said, but he didn't move. "Probably," I agreed, also not moving. He turned to look at me, and there was something in his expression that made my chest ache in the best way. "I want to do this right," he said. "I want to take you on actual dates. I want to know everything about you. I want to build something that lasts." "Like concrete?" I teased gently. He smiled, that rare, full smile that transformed his whole face. "Yeah, like concrete. Something solid, something permanent." We started dating, though that word feels almost too simple for what we were building. Marcus approached our relationship with the same careful attention he brought to his work. He planned thoughtful dates, little things that showed he'd been paying attention to what I liked. A movie at this tiny independent theater that showed old films. Dinner at a Vietnamese restaurant because I'd mentioned once that I missed the pho place near my college campus. A weekend trip to Sedona where we hiked in the morning and spent the afternoon just sitting on the balcony of our rental, talking and watching the light change on the red rocks. He was affectionate in private but careful in public, especially around the job site. We'd agreed to keep things quiet at work, not because we were ashamed, but because we both valued our privacy. The construction world could be rough, and neither of us wanted to deal with the commentary or the attention. It was enough that we knew that we had this secret thing that belonged just to us, but keeping it secret meant stolen moments. Quick kisses in the truck when no one was looking. Text messages during lunch breaks when we were working different sites. Nights at his apartment or mine, learning each other's routines, each other's bodies, each other's hearts. I loved discovering all the small things about him. The way he made his coffee, strong and black with just a tiny bit of honey. How he listened to classical music when he was stressed. These long, complicated pieces that seemed to help him think. The fact that he was secretly a disaster in the kitchen, but tried so hard to cook for me anyway, following recipes with the same intense focus he brought to finishing concrete. The way he touched me like I was something precious, something worth taking time with. And he learned me, too. Figured out that I needed time to process things internally before I could talk about them. That I got anxious in crowds but loved small gatherings with close friends. That I had this habit of organizing things when I was upset, cleaning and sorting until I felt back in control. That I was ticklish behind my knees and self-conscious about the scar on my shoulder from a childhood accident and most comfortable sleeping with my head on his chest, where I could hear his heartbeat. 3 months in, I brought him home to meet my family. I was nervous about it in a way I hadn't been with Daniel, maybe because this time it mattered more. My parents had always been accepting, but there's a difference between abstract acceptance and meeting the actual person your son is in love with. And I was in love with Marcus. Completely, undeniably in love. He showed up with flowers for my mom and a 6-pack of good beer for my dad. And within 20 minutes, he was in the garage with my father, discussing the intricacies of foundation repair while my dad showed off his woodworking projects. My mom pulled me aside in the kitchen and whispered, "I like him. He's steady. He looks at you the way your father looks at me." That night, lying in my childhood bed with Marcus beside me, the house quiet around us, I said, "I love you." He was silent for a moment, and I felt a flutter of panic. Then he rolled over to face me, and even in the darkness, I could see the emotion in his eyes. "I love you too," he said. "I have for a while now. I was just waiting for the right moment to say it." "Is this the right moment?" I asked. He kissed me softly. "Every moment with you feels right." We talked about the future sometimes, careful conversations about what we wanted, where we saw ourselves going. Marcus had dreams of starting his own concrete business someday, something small and specialized, focused on quality over quantity. I'd been taking night classes in project management, thinking about moving into the administrative side of construction. We talked about maybe getting a place together, something with a yard where Marcus could have a workshop and I could have space for a garden. We talked about traveling, about all the places we wanted to see, the buildings and architecture Marcus wanted to study in person. It wasn't a perfect relationship. We had our struggles. Marcus's tendency to withdraw when he was stressed sometimes left me feeling shut out, and we had to work on him letting me in, even when things were hard. My anxiety sometimes manifested as neediness, wanting constant reassurance that we were okay, and he had to learn how to provide that without feeling suffocated. We had arguments, moments of misunderstanding, times when we had to choose whether to push through the discomfort or let it push us apart. But we chose each other every time, even when it was hard, even when it would have been easier to walk away. The 1-year anniversary of that night in the parking lot, Marcus took me back to the strip mall. It was open now, businesses thriving, people coming and going without any idea of what lay beneath their feet. We walked around to the back where the dumpster enclosure stood and Marcus pointed at the ground. "It's still there," he said, "under all of this. Proof that we were here." I pulled him close, kissed him there in the fading light. "We don't need proof," I said. "I know we're real." "I know," he said, "but I like that it exists anyway. I like that someday, maybe 100 years from now, someone might demolish this place and find our names, and they'll wonder who we were, what our story was, and even if they never know, even if it just gets broken up and hauled away, it will have been there. We will have been there." That's the thing about Marcus. He thinks in terms of permanence, of legacy, of making things that matter, even if no one sees them. And somehow, he made me feel that way too. Like I was something worth preserving, like our love was something solid and real, built to last. We're still together now, 3 years later. We have that place with the yard. Marcus started his business last year and it's growing slowly but steadily. I'm working as a project manager for a mid-sized construction company, and I love it. We have a life that feels like ours, built piece by piece, day by day, with the same care Marcus brings to finishing concrete. And sometimes, when we drive past that strip mall, we smile at each other, sharing the secret of what's hidden there. Our names together, carved in cement in a place no one will ever see. A monument to a moment that changed everything. Proof that we were here, that we loved each other, that we built something that lasts. Because that's what love is, isn't it? It's choosing to leave your mark on someone's heart, even when no one else is watching. It's believing that what you're building together matters, that it's worth the effort and the risk and the vulnerability. It's writing your names together somewhere permanent, even if it's just between the two of you, and trusting that it will be enough. Marcus taught me that. He taught me that love doesn't have to be loud or public to be real, that sometimes the most meaningful things are the ones only you know about, that permanence isn't about grand gestures but about showing up day after day and choosing each other. I still think about that night sometimes, kneeling in wet cement at 3 a.m, watching him carefully etch our names where no one would see. I didn't know then that I was watching someone write our future, that those careful letters in the concrete were a promise he was making not just to me, but to himself. A commitment to building something that would last. And it has lasted. It's lasting still, not because it's always easy, but because we both decided it was worth the work. Because we both wanted to create something permanent in a world that's constantly changing. Because we found each other in that summer heat, two people trying to figure out who they were and what they wanted, and we decided to figure it out together. So, yeah, I fell in love with Marcus Chen while watching him write my name in wet cement where no one would see. And every day since then, he's found new ways to show me that I matter, that we matter, that what we're building together is something real and solid and meant to last. And that's the story. That's how two guys in the middle of a Phoenix summer, working on a construction site, found something permanent in each other. It's not the kind of love story that makes headlines or gets turned into movies. It's quieter than that, more private, but it's ours, and it's real, and it's lasting, just like concrete.